The year was 1348. Death was everywhere. His father, his mother, 2 brothers, all gone to the plague. Only 2 boys survived, one of them a young Francesco. And from that shadow of death rose a man who would one day command a trading empire spreading across Europe, though he began with nothing but fear, hunger, and a butcher's son's inheritance. The business world he built was unlike any other of his time, not only for its reach, but for the way he left its record behind. Today, in the archives of Prato, his life still sits on the shelves. About 140,000 letters, over 500 ledgers and account books, and thousands of other documents that tell, line by line, how this merchant made his fortune. Francesco had been born in Prato to Marco and Vermilia. As for his family, little is known. The earliest trace goes back to about 1218, when a man named Accompagnato di Buonfigliolo appears in a land boundary near Prato. From him came Toscanello, then Datino, and finally Marco, the father of our merchant. By the early 1300s, the family had long lived in Prato, though they were not wealthy. Marco had built only a modest fortune, as some later wrote, as a butcher, or tavernaio, as people then called it. Then, in the year 1348, the plague struck. Marco died, and in the same year his wife and 2 of their sons also passed away. Only the younger boy, Stefano, survived alongside the son we are speaking of, Francesco. The 2 brothers were taken in by a relative from Prato, Piero di Giunta dei Rosso, and lived under the care of Piera di Boschetti, to whom the merchant always stayed warmly attached. By 1349 he was already working in Florence, employed in 2 shops. It was likely there that he met the person who opened a path for him to go to Avignon, where the Pope's court had settled. So he seized the chance, and in 1350 he left for France with 150 florins. He raised this money by selling part of his father's land. Now, we know little of his first years in Avignon, but it is likely he worked for a Florentine merchant as an assistant and agent, while also putting his own savings to use. Friends and kin in Prato may have sent him funds or goods to help. In 1353, his brother Stefano joined him with another 100 florins from the family inheritance, though after 1359, Stefano disappears from record. As for Francesco himself, he returned to Prato from time to time. And in 1354 he came back and raised another 138 florins by selling more land. Other home visits are known in the years 1359, 1369, and 1370. Each step helped him build the foundation for the great trade he would later command. So from the scraps we have, it seems he was slowly finding his own footing. And the first clear sign came on July 13th, 1363, when he entered into partnership with Niccolò di Bernardo of Prato, who was a relative of Piera Boschetti. However, a few years later, sometime between 1365 and 1367, the 2 parted ways. He then joined forces with a Florentine named Tuccio di Lambertuccio, though once again he stood in the lesser role as junior partner. And in that company were 2 men who would remain with him for much of their lives. Thierry di Benci, who was Tuccio's nephew, and Boninsegna di Matteo Boninsegna. Both would go on to play solid parts in the great machine he was building. On October 25th, 1367, Francesco began another company. This time with the Florentine Toro di Bertoldieri. That firm lasted until March 15th, 1373. But behind him still stood his former partner Tuccio, who supplied outside backing. Tuccio also used some of his funds in yet another company of his own, so in truth, the ties of money and risk were more jumbled than they might have seemed. By the year 1373, after long years of apprenticeship and careful steps, he at last formed a company in his own name. It lasted nearly 10 years and began with a capital of about 4,600 florins. This marked the true start of his great adventure in Provence. And so, at last, he was independent with skilled men at his side, and he threw his weight into the work. He used every method he knew to widen the reach of the company and to draw in new means and new chances. Still, one must remember he'd already been in Avignon more than 20 years, and he was not yet considered a man of high rank among merchants. In other words, his fortune did not fall into his lap. He gained it little by little, without bold strokes or lucky gambles. He did so through patience, caution, and steady labor. His house at that time was much like many others, not remarkable in size or scope. The difference lay in what he would later build upon it. And it was during these same years that he felt at last sure enough of himself to think of marriage. He was already past 40 when, in 1376, after much urging from friends, and especially from Piera Boschetti, who had cared for him since he was a boy, he finally took a wife. When it came time to marry, he chose a Florentine woman named Margherita. She was the daughter of Domenico Bandini. She was nearly 25 years younger than him, and her father had been executed in Florence back in 1360 for political reasons. By then, she was living with her family in Avignon. Their wedding was held with great ceremony, and though they never had children together, the match proved firm and lasting. But still, the life they shared was not always calm. His long absences for business and his wandering affections, which was common enough among merchants of his world, led to quarrels. Yet beneath the storms, their bond ran deep. And this can be seen in the many letters they wrote to each other. As mentioned earlier, many of those survive. And through them, one can glimpse not only their marriage, but also the merchant's private self, his doubts and worries, and his softer side, which was rarely shown in public. Furthermore, these letters, especially those he exchanged with his friend and notary Lapo Mazze, reveal the contradictions of a man absorbed in trade, yet troubled by the time it stole from family, friends, and faith. Between him and Margherita, the correspondence extended across 34 years. Their notes to one another, which were often plain and filled with common sense, carried them through the long absences, the deaths of trusted companions, and the fear of plague. And through it all he leaned on Margherita, making her mistress of the household. It was a position of real weight. Margherita herself, who lived on until the year 1423 in Florence, shared his strong sense of family. She even welcomed into their home a daughter he had fathered with a slave. The girl, named Ginevra, was cared for in Montelupo Fiorentino as an infant around 1394 or 95, then raised within the household until 1407, when she married a man named Leonardo di Ser Tommaso di Giunta. Meanwhile, his work in Avignon grew and changed. As you already know, he had run his own firm there since 1371, but by November 1382, he began preparing to return to Italy, in part because the papal court had already gone back to Rome some years earlier. On the 10th of December 1382, his sole venture was replaced by a new company. Alongside him stood three men, two of whom we mentioned before. Boninsegna di Matteo and Thierry di Benzi at first, and then, at the renewal in 1385, Andrea di Bartolomeo of Siena. All of them had once served as his factors, and now they rose to share in his enterprise. The company he founded in Avignon kept going with new agreements until his death in the year 1410. Over the years, some partners left or passed on. Andrea di Bartolomeo withdrew as early as the year 1390, and Boninsegna di Matteo died in 1397. Later, however, in 1401, another man joined. Tommaso di Ser Giovanni from Vico d'Elsa. He had once been a trusted factor. By then, the Avignon firm was deeply tied into the wider Datini network. It had branches scattered across France, Catalonia, and Lombardy, and it entered into many joint ventures. The company would last for more than 47 years. This showed proof of its strength and stability. In that time, about 60 men of different ranks and backgrounds worked under it. Some of them were French. The profits were solid, bringing in between 17 and 22% each year. Altogether, he likely earned around 25,000 florins. At the end of the year 1382, he made a great move. With his whole household and company of workers, he left Avignon for Prato. The journey lasted 33 days. They crossed Montgenèvre, then they passed through Moncalieri and Asti. And then they reached Milan, where he spent Christmas. Afterward, he moved on to Cremona, Parma and Bologna, before at last arriving home. Word of his success had already reached his fellow citizens, and they received him with honor. He settled there for good, buying large estates and throwing himself into new building projects. He was close to 50 by then, but Prato was not to be a quiet retirement. Instead, it marked the start of fresh ventures. From there, he built what came to be known as the Great Datini system of enterprises. At once, 3 new accounting houses were set up. The first opened in Pisa on January 8th in the year 1383. Soon after came one in Florence, and then another in Prato. He followed the same pattern each time. He sent a trusted associate to the chosen city to start work, often in partnership with another local firm. Later, he turned that start into a full company, giving the same associate more responsibility, and sometimes raising him step by step until he became director or even partner. And although he built up these offices, he himself lived mostly between Prato and Florence. Still, he'd spent long periods in Pisa in the year 1384 and again in 1386. In one letter, dated April 6th, 1386, he wrote that life there was a dog's life because of endless work. Yet his close watch over the Pisa branch paid off. The firm was renewed in August 1386, and for 6 years it flourished. And the staff kept growing until 28 men were employed there, which was a clear sign of the branch's success. The Pisa Company, on the other hand, did not last as it once had. It was renewed several times. First in July of 1392, then in August of 1395, then again in November of 1396, and in the following year, in November 1397, then in August 1399, and finally in July 1400. But that last renewal came only 4 days after the death of Mano da Albiso, who was struck down by the plague. He had been the man the Pisa Company leaned upon, and with his passing the venture soon collapsed. Datini himself was so shaken by losing Mano and so many other fine companions all at once that he gave up trying to rebuild it. And with Pisa under siege by Florence, there was little reason to continue. Not long before this, however, perhaps as early as January 1383, a branch had opened in Florence, and Datini kept close watch over it himself. In the year 1386, the company settled in Porta Rosa, but 2 years later, it moved its headquarters to Por Santa Maria, where Datini joined the local guild. From then on, his Florentine ventures multiplied. Over the years up to 1404, he set up 7 partnerships there. Most of these included his chief associate Stoldo di Lorenzo, and the last 5 partnerships also brought in Luca del Sera. The Florence office became the true center of his system. By 1392, it had grown so strong that it took part in new companies at Genoa and Pisa. And in the year 1396, it set up another branch in Catalonia. When Stoldo di Lorenzo was suddenly dismissed in 1404, the loss might have broken the company. But it did not. Datini's Florentine house recovered quickly, and in the 28 years it lasted, it employed 43 people, and between the years 1405 and 1410, it was earning profits of more than 15% each year. During those same years, Datini also entered into a private partnership with Domenico di Cambio. Together, they dealt in veils, silk, and whatever other goods he wished, and that too brought in fine returns. Trade was not enough for him, though. He wanted to try his hand at banking. Some of his associates warned him against it, however. They said he might lose his standing as Florence's greatest merchant and gain instead the name of a usurer. But he went ahead. And so, on November 13th, in the year 1398, he opened a bank in Florence's Mercato Nuovo with Bartolomeo di Francesco Cambioni, a young man from Prato. Their starting capital was 5,000 florins. Most of it was Datini's. Yet, fortune did not favor this venture. Bartolomeo died suddenly in August of the year 1400, and by March of the next year the bank was closed. By the late 1300s, Datini's trade spread far and wide, and Genoa became too important to ignore. On the 10th of January, 1392, he opened a warehouse there. It took over from a Florentine company run by Andrea di Bonanno, di Serbeniso and Luca del Serra, who stayed on as partners. But the lead share belonged to Datini's Florence company. And over the years, that Genoese branch changed shape. 6 different companies ran in succession until June 14th in the year 1400. After that came the slow winding down, which was finished by the end of 1401. About 10 men worked in Genoa, and the yearly return, not counting a side venture in cloth making, reached roughly 1500. And once Genoa was established, Datini looked further west to Catalonia. Warehouses opened in Barcelona and Valencia, at first under Genoa's wing. But in 1396, they became independent and were joined with Majorca into a single network. And although there were 3 offices, they were really one company split into parts. At certain times, Valencia acted as the head, with Barcelona and Majorca under it, while at other times, Barcelona held the lead. Nevertheless, the Catalonia firm lasted until the year 1411, and in its halls and counting rooms, 27 men found work. Profits there were high, sometimes close to a quarter of all they invested. Meanwhile, back home, the Prato company formed the steady base of all his affairs. This household firm looked after his estates, but also traded and lent money. Its center was a shop in the city, and from the years 1383 to 1410, no fewer than 20 men served there, besides the farm hands and servants tied only to the house. Many of these clerks and helpers also worked for him in other ventures. Records from Prato are harder to follow, since the accounts mix many trades together, such as masonry, repairs, farming, and true commerce. Even so, we know Datini held contracts for the meat tax and the wine tax, which added steady income to his books. But Prato deserves mention for something greater still. Something that outlasted even his far-flung trading houses. The wool trade, yes. Back in August of 1384, Datini joined with fellow Prato men, Piero di Giunta del Rosso and Francesco di Matteo Belandi. And together they founded the Wool Guild Company. Del Rosso was the true master of the craft, while Datini took charge of buying the raw wool. 8 years later, in 1392, the company was reshaped as Francesco di Marco and Partners Wool Manufacturers, with Niccolò di Piero di Giunta dei Rosso as a leader, aided by the skilled artisan Matteo di Andrea Belandi. Then, in the year 1395, it was renewed once more, this time with Agnolo di Niccolò di Piero di Giunta dei Rosso as a working partner, though he would die before the century's end. Once again, the records left behind by his company are astonishing in their detail. They are so full and exact that later scholars could trace the workings of his wool workshop piece by piece, down to its smallest parts, until the whole living machine of it stood clear again. And in the end, that wool company earned a profit of 600 florins. It may not sound like much, but the true value lay elsewhere. Because within the wider Datini network, selling goods made by their own hands opened the way to further gain. And beyond that, putting money into industry lifted the whole town's economy. For he was not only a merchant and banker, but also a man who stirred new life into Prato itself. What drove Francesco Datini was not always pure profit. Often, it seemed he was chasing something else, like the thrill of trying new things, the measured gamble, the adventure of pushing into fields untested, and in this way he appears almost modern, forever seeking chances to prove his skill and wit. And so, out of this spirit was born another enterprise. In Prato, a dye works which he set up with the help of Niccolò di Piero di Giunta del Rosso. To his partner, he gave strong financial backing, as well as the means to gather materials and expand production. The dye works opened in the year 1395 and kept busy with great orders from the wool makers of Florence, and of course, Prato itself. But when Del Rosso died in July of 1400, the company soon disappeared with him. That year, 1400, marked a sharp turn in the merchant's life. His trust had grown to its widest reach just 2 years before, in November of 1398, with the founding of the great banking company. At that time, the system he had built was immense, spread across many places, held up by ventures of every kind, with each one joined by different partners, running in 2 Italian regions and even in foreign lands. Yet it did not last. In April 1399, Agnolo di Niccolò, one of his chief partners, died, and soon after, the wool company dissolved. Within months, 4 more fell. The ones at Genoa, Pisa, the Tinta, and the bank, each brought down by the loss of the man who directed them. Still, what he had made was immense. From July 1363 onward, the records let us follow his steps, and we see that through those years, 172 people worked by his side, helping carry forward the great web of trade he had set in motion. Indeed, the profits from his business were great. They often rose above 20%, even after paying the main partners who gave their labor. And of all that gain, Francesco kept about 2/3 for himself. By the end, he had gathered close to 100,000 florins in less than 50 years. That was the fortune he left to the Ceppo dei Poveri di Cristo, a charitable trust in Prato. At his death, the Ceppo took over his shares in the companies that still stood, along with his lands and houses. For a while, his name stuck around in the business world. The Florentine branch, for example, went on under the title The Continuation of Francesco di Marco and Partners. But his great trade system died with him. It was not like the enormous houses of the Bardi or the Peruzzi, yet it was far larger than most firms of the time. The reason it could not last was simple. He had never been just a silent partner putting up money. Instead, he had been the head, the guiding hand, and the true master. He knew how to bring together wealth and human effort at the highest level. And without him, the whole enterprise lost its strength. From the year he came back to Prato in 1383 until his death in 1410, little is worth telling outside of his trade. He lived in a house on the corner of the Porcelatico, the one first bought in 1354 by his guardian, Piero di Giunta del Rosso, which was later repaired. In 1386, his name was drawn for the post of gonfaloniere, one of the highest civic offices. He wanted nothing to do with it, and even tried to avoid it by hiding in Florence for 6 days. However, it was not the only time he showed his dislike for public life and politics. Years earlier, in 1376, when he wrote from Avignon to announce his marriage, he said his bride was the daughter of Domenico Bandini, who, as we briefly touched upon earlier, had his head cut off in Florence for plotting to hand the city over to some lord. Francesco added almost carelessly that he did not know which lord it was. In truth, it had been the Pope, but he showed no interest in learning more. Still, as the wealthiest taxpayer in Prato, he was bound to certain duties. He was called on to host important guests, such as Francesco Gonzaga in the year 1392, the Venetian envoy Leonardo Dandolo in 1397, and Louis II of Anjou in 1410. That last guest even granted him the right to place the French fleur-de-lis on his coat of arms. But such events were rare. Most of his dealings with the city came in the form of quarrels over taxes, which he often resented. Therefore, in the year 1394, hoping for better treatment, he secured Florentine citizenship. He lived his life with the mind of a merchant and the hand of a landowner. He put great care into buying and managing his estates. By the time of his death, the list was long. He owned 73 properties in all, of which 27 were within Prato, and 46 were scattered through the countryside. In town, he had 25 houses and 2 warehouses. Outside the walls, he held 35 plots planted with trees and crops, 7 woods, a villa at Palco, a farmhouse, and a house with a tower at Filetole. Together, these were worth more than 10,000 florins. And if you counted his holdings in Florence, another 2,000 could be added. He had a taste for building and repairing, and for beautifying his homes with art. From his early years in Avignon, he kept a sharp eye on the trade in paintings, sculptures, and objects both common and rare. And along with art, he also dealt in books, passing manuscripts into the hands of men hungry for new learning. And so he helped spread the ideas of the humanists. Nothing in life escaped his notice. Letters poured onto his desk from all across the Mediterranean and Europe, filled with news of trade and also of politics, faith, and daily living. These stirred his curiosity, yet work always weighed heavier, pushing such interest aside. In his later years, he traveled often, moving between Prato, Florence, and sometimes Pisa, and back again to his villa at Palco. He was never still. Even in old age, he seemed to be running, as though to stay ahead of death itself. In 1390, when the plague swept it through, he fled to Pistoia. And in June of 1400, hearing the sickness was spreading again through Florence and the countryside, he gathered his household and set out for Bologna, where the worst had already passed. There he stayed until September 1401, and he found the city and the time most agreeable. The last 9 years of his life showed a change. His trade slowly narrowed, and he turned more often to the thoughts of faith. His friendship with the notary Lapo Mazzei of Prato and the council of Giovanni Dominici and other churchmen pulled him further toward religion. Yet, it was not always so deep a devotion. In 1399, he walked with the Bianchi pilgrims, but he wrote of it afterward in such a way that it seemed less a holy march than a pleasant outing through the countryside. In the years that followed, his letters reveal a man who took religion to heart. His faith was real, though he never trusted the church much, having seen with his own eyes how divided and worldly it had become during the Great Schism. He lived through illness in 1403, faced lawsuits, endured the treachery of a partner named Stoldo di Lorenzo, and in 1407 arranged the marriage of his daughter Ginevra, who was born outside of wedlock. By 1410, sensing the nearness of his end, he made his will. On June 27th, he gave half of his estate to the Opera del Ceppo in Prato and half to the Hospital of Santa Maria Nuova in Florence. Yet, barely a month later, on July 31st, he changed his mind. Almost all his wealth was now to be placed in a foundation called the Ceppo of the Poor of Francesco di Marco, and he set it under the care of the commune of Prato, not the church. He died soon after, on August 16th in the year 1410, in Prato. His funeral was carried out with great solemnity. To give away the fortune he had built over more than 60 years of trading was, perhaps, his way of settling accounts before meeting God. Yet, when one remembers the many plagues that claimed his father, his family, and even his partners, it is not hard to believe that his change of heart was a true conversion and not only a calculation. At the same time, what he left behind cannot be judged only as the tale of one man. His life shows us a glimpse of a part of Italian society caught between two ages. The old medieval ways on one side, and the stirrings of the Renaissance on the other. Yet, unlike many merchants of his time, he had no massive family clan to back him and no political power to wield. He came from modest roots in Prato, a city already bound under Florence's rule, and he left no sons to carry on his name. So he lacked two of the strongest forces that shaped the great merchant houses of medieval Italy: family and politics. It has often been said that, in both Prato and Florence, he never showed the least interest in holding office. Nor did he join in the endless fights between city factions. Some might call that a virtue, but it is better seen for what it was. He stood apart. He was a great man, but a solitary one. And in Avignon, he was no courtier. His wealth never turned into power, not even in an indirect way. Yet he was no dull man either. As mentioned before, he paid attention to art. He was moved by religion. He cared about the misery of the poor who lived always on the edge of survival. Still, because he had neither the family tradition nor the personal will, he never took on the role of a citizen in the political sense. So once again, his life shows that wealth alone did not automatically bring power in those last centuries of the Middle Ages. If one phrase could sum up his life, it would be, "In the name of God and of profit." That was his creed. And unlike other Tuscan merchants of his age, the name of the commune, the ideal of the city, was never one he invoked. But in truth, he was not alone in this. Many men who built great fortunes and even dynasties stayed locked in their own work. So when we think of him as a man who rose by his own hand, we see it is unfair to expect he should have been otherwise. And by the example of his stubborn labor and careful building, he gave shape to the countless merchants who came after him. It was they, in their solid work, who laid down the wealth and the habits that would nourish the Tuscan Renaissance. In the end, Francesco Datini's life reminds us that wealth alone does not decide what lasts. Coins are spent, houses crumble, but the choices a person makes, what they build, what they leave behind, these carry forward. Nevertheless, his fortune fed the poor, his papers tell his story, and both still outlived him.